Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of season 2 of the Saxonburg webinars. Today is a really exciting one, and Michael and I was just saying just before we started, we've actually got a lot to cover today, so bear with us. If we get overly excited. I think both of us do get quite passionate about wine and oak, so this is going to be a fun one. So just to the normal housekeeping, everyone will be muted and videos turned off. So if you've got any questions, please, we encourage questions. Just pop them in the comments and we'll get to them throughout the webinar. If we don't get to anything today, or if we do miss a question, we will reply on email. Yeah, so let's get started. Welcome, Michael. Thank you for joining us and sharing your knowledge about barrels with us today. So you've been with Vicard for quite a few years, or the Vicard representative in South Africa for quite a few years. Tell us a little bit more about Vicard and how it all started and what the company is up to.
So Vicard it's a family business, still family owned and family run. They're based in Cognac in France. It's currently the 6th generation that's at the helm. Jean-Charles Vicard is currently the owner, CEO, and yes, as I say, it's a family business. It's a group. They own 2 sawmills and the cooperage. Passed on the 7th generation. I'll have you know is I see in training. The young boys are there busy learning the art of making barrels, which is quite positive and hopeful and good news. So yes, they produce about 40,000 barrels per annum. So they're a pretty large producer of barrels. I, as you mentioned, have been the agent in South Africa since 2003. So this is my 17th year, and yeah, it's great working with a family enterprise. They like all of us have a passion for their art. And yeah, it's great.
That's fantastic. So, you know, just and with trees, it's always I like to pull it back almost to as with vineyards. We all know how important it is where a vineyard is planted. I mean, that's the biggest single quality driver and style driver is where you actually plant it in, and it's very much the same for where the trees are planted and the effect that has on the wine at the end of the day. So go a little bit into the differences between forests, between French and American, and what are the actual differences, and how does that affect the wine at the end of the day?
Okay, this is a topic that, as we said, we could really get stuck into, and it can get excessively technical, but to keep it simple, the French forests are based mostly in the center of France and to the northeast. There are two species that are predominant with regards to oak barrels. There's the Crocus robur and Patria. The one robur likes the more chalky, clay, granite soils. Its annual rings are slightly more wider, which means that it has more medium tight grain and has more tannic structure. The other one, the Patria, is more finer, has more finesse. It likes more the poorer soils. It grows nice and tall. It has much finer grain, which means it's yeah, as I say, less tannic, less powerful. But having said that, it's like vineyards. Yes, you say the soils and the climate and the microclimate, etc., plays a vital role. We see in the forest that even within 50 meters from each other, 2 trees can have different chemical compositions.
Okay.
So it's very much about the amount of light, how it's been grown, because what you want out of an oak tree is for it to grow tall and thin. So it's how it's been, not so much planted, because these forests are not so much planted. Let me first explain that 30% of France, of the land area, is forest.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, exactly. Not many people know that. And many of these state-owned forests are run by an organization called the ONF. And it's very, very strictly run and well run. Thank goodness for that, because that's why today we have this supply and well-run organization. So these trees that we're working with are on average 180 years old. So,
wow.
Exactly. So the barrels that you're purchasing now in 2020, those trees were effectively planted in 1840. So we've got to bear this in mind. It's not, just planted yesterday. And guys will come into the forest. It's so well managed that they clear the area around trees that they've noticed are growing beautifully, to encourage the tree to grow, more straight. The ones that are not growing so well, they might clear. So the management of the forest is very, very important. There are also privately owned forests in France. So in terms of the different species, yes, there are differences there. The different naturally, the forests that are higher, further northeast, where it's colder, are going to grow slower. They're going to be more tight. They're going to be the ones that have a more Mediterranean climate, more to the south, are going to go quicker and fatter. The other oak there are many types of oaks that are being used. The other one that you mentioned was American oak, which is mostly from the eastern part, which is Missouri area. Again, that's a different species. It's called Quercus alba, white oak, and it grows quicker. It has a more sweeter, a more flavor profile than the French oak. So yes, there are all these differences. Then you also get oak from the eastern part of Europe, Eastern Europe, Hungary, Romania, Slovenia, Yugoslavia, all those countries. So yes, that also plays. That's closer to the European oak, though, not so much like the American oak.
Yeah, they're very similar in style. I haven't worked with a lot of Eastern European oak species or oak barrels, but they're much closer in style to French oak than to American oak.
Exactly. Yeah. Funny enough, I read something that many years ago, the French forests were pretty much put in place to grow trees nice and tall, as I mentioned, but not for cooperage purposes, but for shipping, for boats, and for other purposes. And it was only after, and the French wineries used to use wood from Eastern Europe, so they used to purchase wood from Hungary, and then with the whole Russian Revolution, etc., that oak wasn't becoming available, and they started to use their own oak. And today it's the predominant oak for wine purposes.
And do you think why did we stick to French oak? Do you think? If traditionally it was first Eastern European oak that was used for winemaking, why are we still sticking to French oak today? What, in your personal opinion?
In my personal opinion, is they started using the French oak and realized that it was superior quality. And with the forest being so well managed, as you can imagine, the Eastern Bloc, I don't know if the forests are so well controlled and so looked after. So yes, I think, in my opinion, I think they found out that the French oak is of a superior quality, and the industries there, the cooperage industries, is now predominantly based in France. So yeah, it's
okay. And you touched on it. If you think it's actually incredible to think that an oak tree is 180 years old when it gets cut down for making a barrel. It's insane. It's basically two lifespans, and that's the age of South Africa. Two lifespans of trees to get barrels. That's absolutely insane. How long have they managed the forests for? Because that must, the management to keep that sustainable must be very impressive.
It is impressive. Look, they have their challenges. Don't get me wrong. Climatic change. Also, the thing that's driving it is demand. as long as there's the demand, and the demand and the supply at the moment are in balance. But as soon as there's an imbalance, there's going to be a problem. We're focusing today on the cooperage industry. So we're focusing on such a small percentage of it. You must remember that people that are coming to these forests to buy this wood, it's all on auction. So these ONF forests all the wood is sold on auction, and it's a Dutch auction. So it's not a matter of, okay, I bid, I'm willing to, okay, now I'll bid higher, I'll bid higher. You arrive there having done the whole process of studying the forest and spending many months in the forest, measuring the width of the tree, seeing how much wood you're going to attain out of this tree, which will then translate to staves. You then go to the auction, you receive your iPad of such, and they'll say, okay, the first lot that's up for sale is lot 5372. Please punch in your price that you prepare to pay. You punch in that price and you push send. You can't then say, well, no, okay, sorry, I made a mistake. I'll bid higher. No, the highest bidder gets it. Right. So I've sidetracked now. I'm not quite sure.
That's fine. That's actually very interesting. That must be quite a risky. I mean, you as a cooperage must employ the right bidders then, because if you make a few miscalculations, you can end up basically without any oak.
Very much so. And that is that's the thing is I've met Frederick a few times, and I love chatting to him. You know, he lives the forest. He's almost like a Robin Hood. I mean, he looks at a tree and he can tell you exactly by the width of the tree how old it is, and etc. You know, obviously estimates and gauge pretty much how much wood they're going to get out of it. Because what you must also remember is that for cooperage purposes or for barrel purposes, you're using from the ground up until the first branch is what's being used of the tree for barrels. Effectively, 70% of that tree is no waste, but not used for the actual barrel. And so yes, that person is critical in this, and especially for someone like Vicard, which is 100%. We're responsible for 100% of our procurement. So we don't buy staves from any stave merchant or from any negotiant or whatever like that. We purchase trees, which we then process into staves. So it's very, very important. And at the end of the day, yes, as you say, if you arrive at an auction hoping to get so many cubic meters of moraine and you don't end up with that, it has a huge impact on your production and your forecast and your planning.
I can imagine that we were on a topic that Devil has a question, and similar to what you've discussed, and he asked, how has the increase in wine production across the world impacted these forests, and how could they foresee the tremendous increase in production from the 1800s to now?
Well, as again, that's what I was getting at, is the wine industry or is a very, very small part of this forest. At the auctions, you've got buyers, international buyers, people from China, people from wherever coming to buy. Furniture industry, the construction industry, the sailing industry. So yes, how is it? It's a very good question. Up until now, we are told that yes, it's been managed very, very well, and the trees that are, yes, I imagine they're managing the forest in such a way that the trees are maybe perhaps growing a little faster, and so that they don't have to wait for 180 years. Maybe they can bring it down to 150 years, but still, we're talking in the hundreds. We're not talking like 30 years. It's how the increase of production of wine. Yes, it's going to bring us to one of our questions later on in terms of, I'm sure you're going to ask me, well, what's why use a barrel on a wine and why not use an alternative or a stave or use stainless steel? Only the premium wines are seeing new wood, and well, the ultra premium and the premium wines, and those volumes are not huge. And so yes, at this stage it's still sustainable, but who's to tell?
And I've got a question from Conrad. He asks, how many barrels do you, or how many staves do you actually get out of the 30% from the tree?
Okay, so you get out of a tree. Good question. I can't tell you, but what I can tell you is it depends on the length of the tree, the width of the tree, the defects, etc. But what I can tell you is that from 4 cubic meters of wood, of staves, so the planks that they cut, that they then pack, out of 4 cubic meters of wood, you will get 1 cubic meters of staves, which you can actually use for barrels. From 1 cubic meter of staves, you'll get plus minus 11 barrels. So 4 cubic meters of wood comes down to 1 cubic meters of staves. 1 cubic meter of staves is the equivalent of about 11 barrels.
4 cubic meters of wood that's a pretty serious amount of oak. That
it is. Well, it is. But also, yeah, it's, you know, the pith, the heart of the wood's not used. The outside, the bark of the wood's not used. So you're basically using the heartwood in the middle. But again, as I say, it's not gone to waste. It's not just being left there. Every bit of that tree is being used or being sold. But yes, one looks at 180 years old. I love the story of, not so much now, but 10 years ago, 20 years ago when I started in the industry, the guys at the sawmill literally used to be sawing wood, and the bandsaw's blade would just snap and break. And when they go closer and they inspect, they actually find a bullet in the wood. And that's from the days of the war, the times of Napoleon and stuff like that. Bullets in the trees. So
that's incredible. That is truly incredible. Okay, but let's get a little bit into more the actual making of the barrel. How are the staves actually made? And you know, a lot of people actually don't know it. But what is seasoning? Because it's not like you chop down the tree today, you make the staves, and then tomorrow you've got a barrel. There's a whole process that leads up to that. Maybe elaborate a little bit more about that.
A very long and costly process, yes. So the trees are then, imagine a very long tree trunk, log, that's now being transported from the sawmill, well, from the forest to the sawmill. They'll leave it outside for, depends on how long, but let's say 8 months. And this wood gets sprayed. So they'll have sprayers running during the day just to keep the insects away. So you don't want borer beetles to come and bore into the wood and all the rest. That log will then be transported to the sawmill, and it'll get sawn into stave length, a little bit longer. That trunk then gets picked up and brought into the sawmill, and it gets split. So it gets a pneumatic like drill, it comes in and splits the trunk into halves, and then that also gets split into quarters. And then those quarters go on to the most important thing when splitting the oak is to respect the medullary ray, which is running from the radius from the heart out to the bark. And it is also perpendicular to the annual rings, and that is what prevents the staves from leaking. It's impervious to liquid. And so you have to respect, yes, you want to ask me?
So that's why French oak is split and not actually sawn into.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
And so you split it up until quarters, and then from there, today with the technology that they have, the laser technology that they have, they can identify the medullary rays, and they can now saw those quarters into planks.
Okay.
Those planks then go on a conveyor belt and then get sorted or further sawed down into stave thickness. And this is where the first quality control comes in, looking for any knots or anything that is non-conformative. It gets disregarded or cut into shorter staves for other purposes. Those planks then are stacked onto pallets and transported outside, and this is where the seasoning process starts. So it then lies outside in the rain, the wind, the sun for anything up to 36 months. Well, generally about 30 months, 36 months. The purpose of this is to leach all the bitter, harsher, astringent tannins and flavors that you don't want to impart into any wine. So the staves are generally about 30 mils thick, and they leach about 10 millimeters per year, so it stays out for 2 years. Now, for example, Vicard has 8 hectares of wood yard. So 8 hectares full of wood. You can imagine what it costs to buy that amount of wood and leave there for 3 years. And you can imagine what the insurance policy must be in case of fire, etc. So it's a very costly exercise. Today, people are trying to cut corners with regards to seasoning. So instead of leaving it there for 30, 36 months, they bring it in after perhaps 18 or 24 months and then put it in a bath of literally a swimming pool of water and further leach those tannins. But you can't control with water what you're leaching. Are you taking good tannins or only the bad tannins? You have no idea. So it's a little harsh, and you may as well have used that's my opinion. But natural seasoning, open air dried seasoning, apart from your raw material from the forest, is the second most important thing when it comes to barrels.
So that actually links onto a question from Michael as well. He wants to know what seasoning methods are used to treat the barrels. So it's basically just leaving them out in the wind and rain to naturally season. So,
exactly.
But then where your cooperage is situated must also have an effect on how the wood seasons.
Definitely. The amount of rainfall, the amount of, yes, definitely. The humidity, without a doubt.
Okay.
And that's why, as I say, American oak, they use kilns, which are ovens to dry the wood, etc. Some people, not, and it's perfectly allowed. But artificial seasoning, no, it's not as it is. It's artificial. So yes, that period is. So as you're 100% correct, where you're located in France or where you're located in the world, I know there are Australian cooperages that buy French oak and bring it across to Australia and do the seasoning there. They have a totally different flavor profile than if those barrels were made in France. Yes.
Yeah, that's insane. That just links up to into the whole winemaking process about all these variabilities that you have to play around with and try to think of and try and control as much as you can and to get to the desired product at the end of the day. And then that goes on to then obviously, okay, so the staves on our season, they're made into basically a barrel and then toasting. And I think toasting is another very crucial and important part, well, to decide on the style of what that barrel will bring to you. Tell us a little bit more about the actual toasting process and what effect, what changes in the oak when it is toasted.
I love the toasting process. When I first started 23 years ago, you'd go to visit the cooperage and they used the old traditional method of having a brazier, which is like something you see, it's like a metal thing with holes on the sides, and they throw the oak offcuts in there, and then this Frenchman rolls the barrel, puts it on top, and I mean we've got the bending process which we had to go through. But they used to bend it over the fire. We no longer do that, but it was a process of bending the wood over the fire using a lot of water. But so the toasting process starts, and I used to love it. The guy used to go and stand outside because, I mean, they produce our barrels in their winter, and it's freezing cold, so it's nice to stand there by the fire, and then you go and they have a cigarette outside, and then they come back inside and they look and go, oh no, it's burnt, and take the barrel off and take this thing and take all the, like when you burn toast in the kitchen and you quickly go scrape it off or whatever like that. And the guys used to do that. Today, it's such an art, such a precision, and so much innovation and technology involved that the temperatures are precise. We no longer use open fires. We use the wood coming from the yard, which is not going to be used for. So seasoned wood, we then have that processed into pellets, and the pellets are of the same density, the same consistency, and all the rest. That gets fed underground by worm to each brazier. And with those pellets and with air pressure, you can regulate the size and the temperature of that flame almost to 100%. Okay. And it gives consistency from this flame to that flame to that flame, each one. Then we went one step further and we built chambers or compartments, like a little compartment into which each barrel went into to control the micro temperature. Because as I said to you, they toast our barrels in winter. The one that's closest to the door is going to have a different micro temperature than the one that's in the middle of the toasting area. So you've got to look at those things too. So each barrel goes into its own compartment. Then we also noticed that, well, I say we as if I'm involved. The flame dances. It doesn't just burn upright. So you might have, let's say, 220 degrees here, but 160 degrees there. So in terms to get consistency, we have this galvanized cone, metal cone that comes down. It's the same shape as the barrel. So as they bring this compartment down and enclose the barrel, this galvanized cone comes over and encloses the flame. The flame then heats this metal, and it's heat that then radiates and toasts the barrel, not direct heat, direct flame, because flame burns the surface, and you can't. We're just looking for consistency.
Yeah.
We have to. The whole idea is reproducibility and consistency, to give you consistently the same thing every year. Because if you say to me, Michael, this really works for my Shiraz, then I want to be able to give it to you every year, year in and year out. So toasting, very, very important. What does it do? It thermodegrades your lignans, your elagitannins, and it then adds more aromatic flavors. So you get your baked bread, your depending on the temperature, some spice, some depending if you go higher, coffee, mocha flavors coming from the barrels. But it thermodegrades and softens those components that are in the wood. As I said, your elagitannins, your whiskey lactones, all those things.
Okay. And tell me, I mean, generally in South Africa, I think there's been a movement to much lighter toasting. I mean, 15 years ago or so, it was a lot of medium toast, medium plus, or more medium plus toastings actually, some heavy toastings, and I don't think there's a whole lot of heavy toastings anymore. Do you think has there been a general move towards lighter toasting for the greater purity and fruit preservation that you get from that?
Yes, definitely. In general, yes. I mean, you talk about the heavy toast. You still got your brands out there, and some premium brands that still use heavy toasts. And if you put your nose to the glass, you're not going to pick it up. But why? Because they've got that plant material which can handle it, and it just eats it up. So it's very, very important to find a balance, to find a marriage between wine and oak. And I find it quite funny because sometimes the wine critics and the judges, they'll say, oh no, lovely wine, but excessive use of oak. I don't think it's an excessive use of oak. I think it's perhaps the incorrect use of oak. So yes, I've seen wineries in the past perhaps used in the 90s 100% new oak. Then it might have come down to 60% new oak. Today we're generally looking at 30% new oak on our premium wines. And yes, it's amazing how just working on toasting, if you bring your toasting levels down, as I said, it thermodegrades let's focus on elagitannins and whiskey lactones for now. If your wood is high in elagitannins and you use a low toasting, you're going to keep that elagitannin in the wood, and that's an extractable. So your wine will extract that. So you're going to give your wine shoulders and tannic structure. If you use a high toasting level, you're going to thermodegrade those tannins. So you're not going to get those tannins in the wine, but you're going to get aromatic flavors. So you're substituting structure tannin with aromatic flavor. And there's a movement away from that. Look, some Cabernets from some regions, inherently in that varietal, it has green herbaceous characters. And if you use a toasting level which is just a little bit higher, I don't want to say masks it, but it somehow engulfs it and takes the fruit profile just a bit higher and takes it to a more darker fruit, more to a plummy fruit than to a red berry fruit. And that helps. So toasting level and the wine style is very, very important.
No, definitely. I agree with you 100%. And that's actually an interesting point where you said the lighter toastings with high levels of elagitannin will actually give the wine a little bit more tannic structure. And then the higher toastings, will give you that more sweeter, juicier, almost profile in the wine and not necessarily contribute tannin. So it's, once again, it comes down to, the winemaker knowing the vineyards, knowing the grapes, and actually, putting effort into tasting the wines and matching that up with the barrels that you buy and that you use. And I think most wineries now have a pretty set program where they taste every year, and it's a reevaluate every year basically which barrels does work best. And then once you have the coopers, it's going into, you know, what toastings to actually go into, because it is so crucial. And then that, you know, does that play a lot into grain as well? Then the wider grain is generally, you know, a little bit more larger amount of oxygenation happening. Generally develops a little bit quicker. How does that affect, and combined with toasting, affect the wine?
So yes, most certainly. I'm going to quickly run this through because you asked me about forests earlier, and you know, in the olden days when you spoke about a red wine, the guy I would say, okay, right, use Nevers medium toast. Oh no, I'm making a Chardonnay, a white wine. Okay, use Allier medium toast. Fine grain, medium fine grain. Then today then they started talking about grain size and extra fine grain. We know extra fine and fine grain today means it's got lower tannin levels, it's got more lactone levels, meaning more freshness, more respect of fruit, and literally giving freshness to a wine. Again, I must say, toasting plays a huge impact on that. So, but just looking at the wood itself. Then when you start going over to the medium type grains and the open grains, there you're going to find more elagitannins and less whiskey lactone. So more structure, more cajornes than a fine grain barrel. We at Vicard have a range called the Generation 7, which is where we use a near infrared scanner and we scan every single stave. And instead of then supplying you a barrel, you have it there on your Cabernet and your Triple S. Is instead of selecting your barrel just on grain size, we then go deeper and we say, okay, right, select your barrel on tannin potential, tannin selection. So you have a low tannin selection, a medium tannin selection, and a high tannin selection. And for wines that are going to age for longer, so let's say 18 to 24 months in barrel, you actually want to use a medium type grain. In the olden days, everyone thought, no, you had to go fine grain to protect. No, you actually want to use a medium fine grain, a higher tannin level, because tannin protects the wine. It's an antioxidant. It stabilizes the color, and so you want those wood tannins to complement the grape tannin. So finer grain, more oxygen, medium tight grain, less oxygen, more tannin, more structure.
Okay, that's very. I mean, there are so many things to look at. It's truly fantastic. We've got another question from Melinda, and she wants to know, how do you actually transport the barrels to South Africa and get them to the wine estate, which was, I must say, this year probably made a little bit more difficult with the ports and COVID-19. Yeah,
and the Cape Doctor. So I didn't hear if it was Melinda or Belinda, but to answer your question, if I could package and sell French air, I'd be a very wealthy man, because the barrels come whole. So they assembled and packaged in France and loaded as is in containers, 40-foot high cube containers. You can fit anything between, depending on the size of the barrels, which is something we haven't spoken about. You can load 105 to 140 barrels in a container. It would be lovely if we could flat pack them and bring them here, but no, the expertise and the possibility of leakage and the problems thereafter are just, so they come packaged in whole. To the port over here, as Dirk was saying, we have the challenge of the wind blowing it in January, from January through to March. It's the windiest part of the time in Cape Town. So very often the ships bypass Cape Town and go to Cook and come back 2 weeks later. The harvest comes a bit early and guys are crying for their Chenin and Chardonnay barrels, and you say, I'm sorry, I live in Greenpoint. I say, I can literally see the vessel, but it's not coming into the harbor. There's nothing I can do besides swim out and go fetch it. So yes, it gets transported like that, offloaded and delivered directly to the client.
Yeah, I know the closest call I've ever had in my career was we were waiting for Chardonnay barrels. It was our last Chardonnay picking of the year. The grapes came into the cellar. It was already pressed, and that very day that the grapes arrived, the barrels arrived. So it was a case of quickly hydrating the barrels and as soon as we racked the juice off, it went straight into those barrels. They just barely made it off the ship.
Fortunate.
It can be quite a stressful event, and I'm sure you've had plenty of winemakers phoning you, shouting at you like, "Where are my barrels? I need to pick. I need them."
Precisely. No. It's let's put it this way: January, February is quite a nerve-wracking time. So yeah, for sure.
Michael, the rest of the year you do nothing, so it's okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Don't worry, people also think I only work in January and February and March. So. Okay, we've got another question from Andrea. She wants to know, do you simply unwrap the barrels and pour the wine into the barrel, or is there a bit of prep work involved?
There is a amount of prep work involved, only because, the barrels have been tested in France. They've been, they hygienically, they're 100% clean. They're tested for all sorts of, TCAs and all the rest. But only because it spends 3 weeks on the ship, possibly 5 weeks if there are any delays. It comes across the equator, depending where that container is loaded on the vessel. It could be down below, it could be at the top. There are temperature implications, and so the barrel might have lost a bit of humidity and dried out somewhat. So we always recommend that when the customer receives the barrels, to then swell it. With hot water, if you've got access to hot water, maybe 20, 30 liters of hot water, keep it on the one head, standing upright vertically, and then for a couple of hours, turn it over, and just to swell it out a bit to give it some more humidity. With cold water, fill it up perhaps a bit more. Some guys like to keep the barrels overnight or 24 hours. But then there are others that fill immediately. They say, no, I don't want to leach any of that goodness that I'm going to lose, because when that water comes out, it's dark. It looks like a brandy. So you do lose some toasting impact and some, So generally it should be swelled first, yes.
Yeah. I think on the heads especially, just to make sure you don't have any leakage on the heads, because I think generally that's where you can get a lot of problems. Then another question from Conrad. He wants to know what are the costs of a barrel at the moment. You can give me the euro price, and then we can talk about the price currently in rand, because that is quite volatile at the moment.
It is very volatile. So Conrad, it depends on the size of barrel. So a 2 to 5 liter barrel at the moment, 225 liter barrel, which is today probably about 50% of the purchases is 2 to 5s. It's the traditional Bordeaux size shaped barrel. That will sell for about 745 euros. So we're talking probably about, with the exchange rate where it is today, about 15,000 rand. Then you've got what Dirk uses, which is a 300 liter barrel, which is becoming increasingly popular, and I'll explain why. That's around about 840 euros, so 17,000 rand a barrel. This is French oak that I'm referring to now, because American oak is about, it's way cheaper. And then you've got the larger sizes. You've got the 500 liters, which again, coming back to your usage of lower toastings, people are also using larger sizes of barrels, because your surface area is your contact to surface area is less, so less impact from the barrel. And that 500 liters, about 1,200 euros. So yeah, I'm not sure what that is. Probably closer to 20,000 a barrel. I'm not sure.
Must be around there. So you were saying, so 50% of the purchases are still 2 to 5 liter barrel. And maybe talk a little bit about the effect. You can just quickly, you've already alluded to it, but the effect of the size of the barrel actually has on the wine.
It's pretty much what I explained there. It's your amount of literage to surface area is more when you go to bigger sizes. In terms of hence less impact from your toasting, less impact from so the belief is that you're respecting the fruit more, and you get more purity of fruit. When you go to 2 to 5 liters, it's more for Bordeaux varietals, your Cabernet Merlot, Petit Verdot, Malbec, where you can take that impact. Shiraz as well is one that works very, very well with 2 to 5 liters. But again, it's got to be a good match. In earlier days, the 225 liter was the predominant one. It was probably 80-90% of the sales. But today, guys are moving more to larger formats. Over and above that, you've got the larger formats, which are called foudres and upright fermenters, which is anything from 1,000 liters up to 10,000 liters. So that's also becoming more popular, but that's obviously much more expensive due to the stainless steel and taps and doors and everything that you need. But yes, I'm going to get shot here, but if you're wanting a more feminine style, more purity of fruit, more red fruit, go for bigger format, lower toastings. You've got a Cabernet from the Helswerchter, and you go for it 2 to 5 liter, beautiful.
Yeah, I think winery like Kanonko uses, I think, mostly 2 to 5 liter barrels, and that's
predominantly 2 to 5. Exactly.
Warmer slopes on Simonsberg, producing wines with big bold tannins. They can handle that amount of oak very well, and it's also the style of the wine and the aging of the wine and all of that. So
you won't find. I stand to be corrected, but I don't think you will find a 300 liter barrel in Bordeaux itself. So it's 2 to 5s.
That's what works. And then we've got another question: that, how long can you use the barrel actually in a winery?
Again, I'm making myself sound like an old man. Earlier days, you used to find what we call second fill barrels. So in other words, barrels that have been used once on the market. You could buy them, white wine barrels that were just used once for 12 months or so, and then guys were selling them off. But today, that's hen's teeth. It's scarce. You won't find it. Guys are holding on to their barrels. So on average, I would say guys are using their barrels for 4 or 5 years, with many wineries using their barrels up until 8 to 10 years. As long as that vessel is hygienically clean, it's still going to offer you some micro-oxygenation. It's still going to offer you some rounding off, polymerization. It's not going to give you any tannic impact. It's not going to give you any aromatics, but it's a good, clean vessel for aging and storing of wine. So that's the most important thing, is to have it hygienically clean, and then you can use it for many, many years. But that's why you always need that percentage, a component of new second and third fill, just to give the impact. Also, just on the older barrel front, if your barrel's perfectly hygienically clean, then the guys use alternatives, which is barrel inserts. So it's French oak, American oak, little planks, little staves, which they then insert into the barrels and attach to the bung, and that then adds aromatic flavor and some tannin, depending on what stave you're using. So what you've lost there, you gain from those planks.
Yes, and why? Just as a final question, we've spoken about the cost of a barrel, and obviously, I mean, you look at a 300 liter barrel costing you close to €1,000. And you only produce 400 bottles of wine from that. If you don't have any losses, I mean, it's a massive cash input that you have to put in, or cash expenditure, I should say. Why, in your mind, do you think? Well, why would the premium wines always use barrels? Why are they so much better than using alternatives of chips and staves and all of these?
The market for alternatives has grown dramatically worldwide, and so too has the technology and the know-how when it comes to staves and to alternatives. Why would I recommend barrels? Well, because coming back to the origin, where it's come from, coming back to the seasoning of it, the toasting of it. We know that the wood has been seasoned for 30 months, open air dried. It's top quality oak from the best forests of France. The alternatives, you're not going to take the best wood from a 180-year-old oak tree, cut it into 7mm planks, and sell it for 52 Rand a stake. It's not. So I'm not saying that the wood is of inferior, that it's bad quality. I'm just saying that the wood there is, I see alternatives. Terroir, the plant material that you're bringing in, the grapes that you're bringing into the cellar is of premium quality. The barrel is just going to take that and just lift it. It's going to make it that much better.
Yeah. No, definitely. No, I think barrels will be here to stay on the premium market, and
Yeah, looking forward to many years of happy, working together to come with the best marriage between Vicard and Saxonburg wines.
no, definitely. I'm very much looking forward to working closely. I mean, I've worked with you now for a few years from before Saxonburg as well, and I think it's fair to say that I love Vicard barrels, and I do think they are of incredible quality, and they work well, and I think they work well on the Polka Dry Hills, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
For us.